Hi guys, Jay Carter here. Today we're going to be doing some mini painting and you will enjoy the results. We're going to take the Trinket miniature from the Critical Role set and we're going to be turning it into Iorek Byrnison, the polar bear wearing sky iron armor from the Golden Compass movie, which itself came from the Golden Compass book from the series His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. So first, I just wanted to show off, I've got some paint brushes here that I like to use. We've got your sort of tapered wide brush. We've got a slightly less wide straight brush. And then we've got a slightly smaller straight brush. And these are all pretty good for applying the big stuff when you want to paint a miniature. Get on the base coat, the primer, or what have you. But if you wanted to do finer and finer detail, of course, you'll need smaller stuff. So we've got the smaller ones here. This one's starting to get pretty small, and you'll have to get kind of close to see this one. There's actually a little cap on it to keep it nice and secure. But that guy is super tiny, and I'm not sure if you can see him very well. But he's got very, very few hairs, and I'm actually really happy about him. He helps me get the really small bits. So there's that. As you can see, most of them are from the same set. They're fairly inexpensive. I find that it's easier to mistreat my brushes when they're not expensive. I like to do that when I paint. And but if you if you need more, it's fairly easy to go to the craft store and get some new ones. I've actually been using these for several years, so I've been treating them fairly well. The only ones that I buy all by themselves are the ones that have specifically the sort of size and shape that I'm looking for. So you'll notice that these two are different than the rest of them. Of course, you'll need some kind of cloth or other paper towel, something to dry your paintbrushes on in between dipping them in the water and applying a new coat of paint. So that's what I start with, of course. And then for the water itself, I just use a country crock container or other sort of butter or margarine container. I'll use the lid as a place to put my paints. So I'll use that. And then inside of here, I'll just put the water, and that way I can kind of go back and forth between, having plenty of water to wash my brushes in and then going to my paints there. And because I work with water-soluble acrylics, they actually dry and become plastic, so it's easy for me to sort of scrape these off if I really wanted to. So this works pretty well, and I've been using this again for a couple of years. Whenever I want to, go between projects, if I have a lot of paint on here and there's still some water inside, I can usually just sort of put it upside down, close the lid up, and that way it all stays nice and secure. And whatever's inside, the moisture on the inside will actually keep the paint moist. So that's a double bonus. You don't waste your paint. So of course I've got that. And then I'll show you some of my paints here. These water-soluble acrylics I've had for quite a while. These are Americana brand. And I've got a couple of other ones. We've got this one that's just your basic metallic sort of silver kind of thing. And you can mix that with any of these paints to make any of these paints more shiny. But you don't really want to do that too much. Otherwise, you're going to end up sort of diluting the color, making it more gray. These actually are little sort of shampoo containers that you find in like at Walmart or something. And I've actually taken large sort of the large sort of tubes of paint that you can get at the craft store, and I've just squeezed out as much as will fit in here, and that makes it easier for me to handle. I like being able to keep them in this drawer and roll them back and forth, and that really isn't possible if you have them in a tube. So I've gone ahead and just filled these up. Now I like to do a little bit of contrast so I can see what I'm working with. So here I've got the orange with the blue. In the case of these other two, I went for a lighter green. I only had a darker sort of forest green before, more of a muted tone, and so I decided to go for something brighter. I found myself trying to mix that quite often, so I wanted to go ahead and just get something that I could use straight out of the tube. Same thing for the purple, where I would mix the blue and the red often enough that I thought, maybe I should just get some purple and start with that. I don't know if you can see that very well. But that's sort of an introduction to my paints, and the other materials that I use for painting. The next thing, of course, that anybody will need is a mini. And as you can see, I've got my bear mini that I'll be painting here in a second. So stick around and you'll see what that looks like. We're going to be painting a bear miniature. And as you can see, our bear is the infamous Trinket from Critical Role. But I like the idea of doing something a little different with Trinket. I don't often come across a bear that has armor on it. Usually it's the typical brown bear. So for this project, I've actually decided that we're going to be doing Iorek Byrnison from the Golden Compass. So I went ahead and Googled Iorek Byrnison to kind of see what the style of his armor was. There's a couple of styles. It looks like in the first movie you had sort of something more golden that sort of shined and was a little bit more glamorous and whatnot. But in the book, it sort of described it as sky metal, sky iron. And I thought, I'd much rather do something that I feel like is more accurate to the book. So in the movie, it does get a little bit more rough and irony and things like that. There are some other images that I thought were kind of neat. But as I was going through, I came across this particular one, and I thought, what? Did somebody stat out Iorek Byrnison in 5th edition? And sure enough, yes, they did. So we have Iorek Byrnison, Bjorn to be Wild, Monster from His Dark Materials. That's the name of the book series that the Golden Compass comes from, the Golden Compass being the first book. And so I thought, well, I mean, if somebody statted him out, of course I have to paint him up. So I actually found the image here, and this comes to us courtesy of Humperdink's Wares, and the artwork is credited down here at the bottom, Carol, and then Soul of Steel top right. So Carol has done this one over here, the sketch of our armored bear, and then Soul of Steel up here with this really beautiful armor here. So I'll be sort of building up to the idea of using the Iorek Byrnison stack block. So I thought, well, I mean, if I was going to go realistic, what would sky iron conceivably be? So I went ahead and looked it up on just a fan wiki, just to kind of see what information might be available for it. It says that it is meteoric metal, as sky iron suggests, of course. And one of the notes that it has in here is that although sky iron is fictional, native peoples of the Arctic value meteorites, particularly the Cape York meteorite. And I thought, well, I mean, if you're going to go real, you may as well go real. Sure. So I went ahead and looked up the Cape York meteorite, and boy, does this thing have an interesting cross section. This looks really cool. If armor was made out of this stuff, that would look amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and use this sort of style, this sort of dark, and then overlaid with these sort of cross-hatched white design here. I think that would be really neat, realistic, but also visually interesting. Something a little bit more close to what might actually be considered sky metal. So here we are. I'm sort of recording on this end over here as well. We'll go ahead and get that feed going. And we have our Iorek Byrnison miniature. Of course, this is not Iorek Byrnison. This is Trinket, but Trinket is wearing some delightful armor that we're going to turn into some sky metal, based on the research we did on the real world meteorite. So I've got my water in here to dip my brushes in. I've got my palette, which I'm going to be filling up with some paint here in a second. And I've got my brushes all ready to go. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at our mini here. So this looks like it's got a lot of really great texture on the fur, and we're going to take that texture and really make it sing and pop. So let's go ahead and pull out our black, and I'm going to actually end up using very, very little of this black, because what I want to do is thin it down to the point where I can just apply it as if it were a wash. This is one of those advantages that water-based acrylics have, where you can water them down quite a bit and they end up taking on some almost watercolor-like properties. So I'm actually just taking this and I am putting a lot of water into my brush, and I'm just pulling that out. And I'm actually going to put it down here into this little lip here. And the more I do that, add a little bit more water, the more I do that, the more liquidy it becomes. And you see how this becomes really just more of a glaze almost, right? So we're just going to use a little bit of that black down there at the bottom and let it settle into the cracks. And that's going to give Iorek some nice definition on his fur. The polar bears don't have white skin. They have black skin. That's why their noses are black. And so adding this darker color here to our mini is actually going to help that sort of come out a little bit, and we can start to see the definition in his fur. Now, I'm not worried about it getting everywhere just right now. I just want to make sure that the definition is there. And so as soon as I come back in with the other colors that I'm planning on putting onto the armor, that'll be covered up a little bit. So we're not going to worry too much about having that cover the armor. And we'll kind of just add some more from our palette. And you can see how, and he looks a little bit dirty right now, but the wash is going to settle into those lower spots really nicely and give him some good definition. So if you just let yourself go crazy with the wash, it'll do its job. You'll also notice that I've actually got a little bit of texture here on the base, and I wanted to kind of leave that there to mimic what it might look like if it were sort of this windswept, snowy plain. So you've got your snow down there as well that kind of accompanies our polar bear. And you can see I'm going down in underneath him a little bit, and I do that because you never know from which angle your players are going to be seeing this. And I wanted to give it sort of as much realism as possible. Obviously, you're not going to be sitting there staring at it for a long time, so I'm not too worried about it if I don't get anything quite right when it's underneath. But that'll give us sort of a good impression of what he looks like from any angle. Just sort of taking my paintbrush into the deeper bits just to make sure I don't get too much in a location that would end up looking weird if I left it there. But generally speaking, the more you put in there, the better. So that's looking okay for right now. And I think that'll be a good place to sort of pause and let them dry out. Take a look at my paints for the next step. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let that dry a little bit. All right, so the next step in our paint of our Iorek Byrnison is to apply a base coat of color to the armor. So we're going to go ahead and take our white and lay some down on the palette to give us just a little bit of white against that black to give us a nice dark gray. We're then going to apply that on the armor, and that will give us a good basis for the color that we're shooting for. Remember, we're looking at actual metal from a real meteorite. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that a little bit closer. So here we've got this dark gray here, and then we're going to go over it in these kind of cross hatch patterns with a lighter gray on top of it. So let's go ahead and do that with our white here. So we've got our white and our black, and we only need just a little bit of white here. We'll sort of separate that, and we'll pull some black up into it, and we'll get ourselves a nice dark gray. Black goes a long way, guys, so don't go too crazy with the black. We're wanting to start with a nice dark gray, but nothing too dark. That's about right. That looks the color of iron to me. So we're going to take that and we will apply it to the armor as a base coat. Now, you may have noticed, obviously, that we have a white base coat already on there. And that's because the mini came as a gray, like this gray here on the bottom. But we wanted to have something down first so that we could come in and that paint would have something to stick to. So I went in with the white, the same white that you saw me use to mix that gray, and I put that all over my mini. And that's just so that I could have something for the other paint to stick to. You can see how my gray is doing on this white. That's what we call a base coat. So the white is my base coat, and then the gray here is the actual color that I want to shine through, so to speak. So as we're applying this gray, what we're going to do afterward is come in with a more fine brush and come in with a lighter gray to apply the details. Laying down this coat gives us something to work off of, just like the white did. The white gives us something to work off of. So I'm just filling in the gaps here. A nice solid color is going to give us a good place to start. You can see that the wash, the black wash that I laid down, is doing its job. You can see how it's settled into the cracks in here and made that a little easier to see. I'm going to need some more, pick up a little bit more gray on the brush. Now he's got this little hole where his tail sticks out. So what I'm trying to do as I go is avoid that hole so that we can see that there's fur underneath it. And I'm actually going to take a little bit of water here and just extend my paint just a little bit. What that's going to do is it's going to make it a little lighter against the white. And it's also going to let me sort of extend the life of the paint on my palette. So I can do just a little bit more with it. And as you can see, maybe I added a little bit too much water, but that's totally fine because, as the great Bob Ross said, there are only happy mistakes. I'm probably misquoting him, but I'm okay with that if you are. Something like that, right? Now he's also got this sort of breastplate underneath, so I'm going to have to get in there and do a little bit of breastplate work, just enough to give us a suggestion of color so that we know that it's not fur. And you can kind of see how I'm coming in from below here so that I can make that visible. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse out my brush. So now that I've rinsed out my brush, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to pick up some of that gray that I left on the back. The more I dilute it, the more it just becomes like a wash for the fur. So we can patch things up there, let it blend in a little bit. This wouldn't necessarily be something you'd want to do on every mini, but in this case it works because we're actually using that to our advantage in this case, like kind of like a wash. So that's just fine there. And I need to pick up a little bit off of that tail. Again, because what's underneath is the color we want it to be, we're okay letting that be kind of like a wash. So that's fine. Go ahead and clean that up just a little bit more. Great. Good. Okay, we're in good shape. We've got, and all I did was I just dried my brush off. You can see I'm picking up these little bits here down near the base where the water has settled, drying my brush off on my cloth, and I'm coming back in now that it's dry to sort of pick up what's left. All right, we've got a good basis for our sky iron armor. We're going to need to do the helmet, and then we'll let it dry again, and we'll come back when that's done. So let me just get this. And you know what? I'm actually going to switch brushes here. By the way, you never want to leave your brushes inside the container. That damages them. So I'm going to use this super small brush here. This one actually is a little bit frayed, so I'm going to switch over to one that's even smaller. This guy right here has done me pretty well. So we're going to use that guy. And we'll come in and grab some of the gray. Again, it is already watered down, so it should be easy to work with. We're going to go ahead and hit his helmet here. Goes around the back of the ears, around the back of the ears. Getting a little close to it just so I can see what's going on. Sometimes it's difficult for folks with glasses to do this kind of thing because the glasses only let them focus a certain distance away. And in my case, I am nearsighted, so I happen to have the advantage because if I don't want to look at it through the glasses from far away, I can look at it through over the top of my glasses. Other folks aren't quite as fortunate. If their glasses aren't helping them, they have to take them off and then look at it from far away, which is just inconvenient. So I think we've got that helmet done up pretty well. It's in good shape. And we'll go ahead and let that dry out and do what we need to do for the next step. Okay, so our next step is going to be to take a look at the lighter colors of gray for our base coat. So let's go ahead and get over here and take a look at, we have some sort of mid-tone grays in there already, and then we have some lighter grays on top. It looks like there's at least 3 different colors of gray in here, and we're not going to get super detailed because obviously that would take a while, but we are going to get that nice layer effect by building up on top of what we already have. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at our mini here, and we've got a good base coat of this dark gray that's doing its job really well. So now we're going to come in and we're going to apply a lighter gray on top of that. And I'm using my super small brush here to do this job. Let's see it's so small the camera won't even focus on it. Look at this. Nope. Let me see if I put something in front of it. There we go. There it is, right. So you can see how this is super, super thin. And we're going to use that to get some good detail. Now, before I do anything with this brush, I've just sort of dabbed a little bit of water on it. I'm actually going to take the white that I still have, and I am going to thin out the gray that's already there because we're looking for a mid-tone gray at this point, and we want to have enough that it will be able to be picked up against the dark. So I'm comparing it to the dark as I do this so I can kind of see what a good tone would be. And I think that's about right. Now I want some more because I want to be able to use enough of it with my small brush to lay down a good sort of pattern with the lighter gray. And right now, I think we're at a good spot here. We're going to come back with some really light gray here in a second. But right now, you'll see that I've got this brush is a little bit sort of frayed. And I like that. I think that's a good place to be. I'm going to go ahead and just take off as much of this as I possibly can because I want to be able to use that frayed edge as part of my design. So as you can see, I've got it's sort of got some hairs around the edges. So now I'm going to take this lighter gray and I'm going to start applying it to the outside here in a way that suggests that lighter gray crosshatch. And I'm just going back and forth, letting the texture do part of the work. I don't want to cover up all of the dark gray because if I do that, I've basically made my base coat sort of irrelevant. But I do want to have enough on there that you can start to see it. Now you can't really see right now, but let's add a little bit more white and then thin that stuff out even more on my brush. and we'll start to see a bit of a difference here. So we've got some nice, and it's starting to get a little bit dry. You can tell it gets dry when it gets a little tacky like this, right? So let's go ahead and take this and just spread it out a little bit so we can really just get that sort of hairy look on the brush. And that should give us another opportunity to come back in and really just come in and give us a bit of a diagonal pattern. And once we're done with that, I'm going to come in and go the opposite direction. And that'll help us to get a little bit of action on that cross hatch. So I've just turned my MIDI 90 degrees. And I'm coming back in and letting it sort of live in that space. I'm not worried about the details just yet. I just want to make sure that I'm giving him a general lighter crosshatch design so that when I come back with the really light bits, it'll mimic that sort of back and forth direction. Okay, so now that I've done that, I want to go for the lightest gray, almost white, that will really help me to contrast with that darker gray. I'm taking this white and I'm going to mix it with the gray that I've already got. That's giving me an opportunity to really just get as light as possible without being shock white. We don't want it to rival the white of the polar bear. So you can see compared to that dark, shows up really well. So we've got dark, mid, light. That light is really going to go far for us. And I've got it on. Now I'm just curling my brush. You can see as I do that, it really helps the definition on the tip. That's what I want. I want to make sure that tip is nice and sharp so that when I come in and I do the detail, you'll be able to see it really well. So I'm going to come in here and we're just going to start going back and forth, and let the armor do what it does. I need some more on here, some more paint. The armor do what it does. So I'm not worried about putting any specific patterns in here just yet. We'll add a little bit more water. I'll worry about the patterns as soon as I can come back in. And it's okay to have large areas and small areas here. That's part of the detail we want. So it's okay if things get big or small. We'll deal with all of it. We'll take all of it. I think that's going to look really nice when we're done. Put a little bit on his helmet here. And I'm going the same direction first so I can be sure that I have a nice sort of pattern emerging here. And then once I'm confident that that pattern has a good start, I'm going to come in the opposite direction and just add where I think it really needs it. So for example, I want to start building off of the bits I've already got. And part of that design was that it was back and forth on the various bits. You could see that it really built off of itself. There were parts where you could see it coming off in lots of directions. And now that we've got sort of a bigger pattern emerging, you can start to see the entire set of armor as this sort of crosshatch effect, right? And we've got a nice depth to what's going on here because we've got a dark and a light, well, a dark, a middle, and a light. Now, so far, this is looking pretty good, right? You've got that nice crosshatch pattern going on, but we're not done. We're going to go back and then we're going to crosshatch the crosshatch. All right. Got some good action in here. And in some cases, I'm just letting it be a little frayed. I'm not too worried about it. Sometimes you get some really nice texture if you just let the brush do its thing. Coming on off the helmet. That's good. That's good. Remember, all of these strokes are just going to be at an approximate 90-degree angle. Okay, now I'm taking just a little bit more white, really pulling it in to the lightest gray I can get without being that pure white. And now I'm going to go back the initial direction that I did. I'm going to go ahead and just pull off of the second strokes that I did. You can see I've got a little bit of strokes here and there. And I'm just pulling off of those second strokes with a third set of strokes. That gives me some really great detail. Pulling off of those second set of strokes. And only here and there, because I don't need a ton, right? I'll go ahead and add a couple here so I can pull off those. Good. All right. Okay, so our final step for the armor is going to include a little bit of detail work. So we just want to point out what it is that we're doing and then really make it look good. So right now what we've got is a set of armor that has a kind of a pattern across it, but it all sort of looks the same at this point. There's really no definition really calling out any of the details. We're going to fix that right now. So what I'm going to do is add some more of this black, and I might need some more black here, but we're going to add some of this black back into the gray mix, and I might need a little bit more. That might be good. That might serve its purpose. We'll be all right. Okay, so I've sort of thinned out that gray, given it a little bit of space to live, and I am going to just put a dab of black on there, see if I can just have a little bit to play with if I need to. All right, we've got some water on there, we've got a little bit of black, and what we're going to do is come in and take that, and just like we did the wash on the main body of our bear, we're going to come in, and this is going to fill in the details of the armor. So we'll take this, and we're just going to go around and make sure that all the little undersides get a good solid dark gray treatment. And what this is going to do is it's going to help define the edges of the armor separate from the bear, and also each plate will feel separate from each other plate. You see how it's just coming in and making the edges feel distinct. We're not necessarily trying to make this look clean per se, and because it's nice and watered down, it's not going to have a really strong change. It's not going to create a strong change to the rest of our design. It also helps that it's a dark gray and not straight black. If we did straight black, that might be a little bit too extreme. So we're just trying to come in and give the edges some definition. And that's going to be really good looking once everything's all done. I'm still just pulling straight from what I had before. And you can see that as I put it in these edges here, that it gains a lot more, it looks a lot sharper, right? It looks like there's really something going on. So I'm going to add just a little bit more water here to really get that black thinned out. Come in under the back end, around the edges here. Underneath all those bits. Now comes the tricky part. I'm going to go into the main body of the armor, and I'm going to try and make sure that I can get that detail just as close as I can to the edge so that it really has a chance to sing. You can start to see the armor taking shape and becoming visible. There it is. Now, we also have these excellent emblems that were sculpted into the shoulder pads. So I want to pull those out a little bit as well. Just going to give it a nice go around. That's it, guys. We did it. We took our Trinket armored bear miniature and we turned it into Iorek Byrnison from the Golden Compass. And we added some great details to it. We added some patterns to the outside of the armor, and we let him really just kind of sing as a polar bear. So thanks so much for joining me. We'll see you next time. I hope that we can make this a regular thing. So we'll see you later.